And welcome to Conservative Talk.
And we got another awesome episode this week.
You say that as if we never do, though.
Hey, look, I just think that it's always great anytime that we can sit here and kind of talk to our followers. So speaking of, Kamala Harris said it's death to the filibuster.
Kamalalalalala. And Democrats get back to their election fraud roots.
And privatized universal gun registries are here.
And to strike or not to strike? That is the question.
And Justin's over here playing Shakespeare. But speaking of Shakespeare, Buck says that, the CARES Act was actually ransom payment for Biden to keep secret Hunter's laptop.
Did he really now?
We'll have to see. When we missed him last episode, so he's ready to talk.
Going to want to listen.
It's going to be fun.
And welcome back to Conservative Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And as always, we always like to remind all of our viewers to make sure they hit the like and the share button on any of the platforms that they see any of our productions on, simply so we can help spread our message and help get higher into the newsfeed, because with every like and every share, we get higher in the newsfeed. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you can stay up to date on any of the productions that we put out. And in the future, you'll be able to see anything that we do produce and we do put out on any of the platforms that you've subscribed to. Also, while you're doing all of that, make sure you go to our website at conservativestalk.org and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner and help us out with what you're able to. Every little bit goes an incredibly long way into helping us be able to transform this production into what it has so far. We now have the capabilities to where we're able to reach a much broader audience, and everything comes back to our sponsors. So thank every single one of y'all and everything that you've done for us so far. So, Jamie, do you have something special you want to say?
Absolutely. So once again, I want to remind everyone to boycott hometown headlines. This has become not just a personal issue. I'll just go ahead and say it, not just a personal issue, but it's an issue amongst conservatives. I mean, this is someone who has continued to try to put their voice out there and try to basically snub Northwest Georgia and our conservative values. So it's time to put an end to it. So remember, anytime that you can, share, boycott hometown headlines. And if you do follow hometown headlines, unfollow them. And let Roman News Tribune know that this deal that they're doing is probably not the best one. We love Roman News Tribune, but we do not love hometown headlines.
Well, he loves Roman News Tribune.
I do. It's one of my favorite things. Can I do my favorite part now?
No.
Oh,
and
yeah.
as always,
I always get excited.
Yeah, he does. He gets a little antsy from time to time, so you can forgive him. But we do have some new affiliates that have picked up our program and are now running it on their platforms as well. And we want to say thank you to Veterans for America First and their network of Veterans Voice. Veterans for America First is an organization that really puts forth American First values, and from a perspective from the veterans, first responders, and law enforcement perspective. And it's an organization that is really trying to make America a better place, just simply from the issues of those who have actually served in public service. Also, thank you to the organization that has been carrying our productions at the national level, and who has helped us be able to get to a position to where we can actually go in and meet Kareem Jean-Pierre and the White House press briefings one day.
Yeah, this is our affiliate network that gives us our press credentials, and we want to thank Net News Network for allowing us to be a part of them.
Thank you. So, Jamie, now let's get into your favorite part.
I get so excited. Boom! 52 days until we beat Stacey Abrams. It's almost over.
Loathe this at this point.
It's almost over. We're almost there.
You're right. I just like hearing
here's
this.
the thing.
I just hate making this woman a relevant thing.
I know, but here's the thing, right? We do this every week to remind all of our followers and our listeners that you have to get out and vote for Brian Kemp. Like that's
Can't
not
say that.
That's not an endorsement. Get out and vote for the Republican candidate.
Mm-hmm. Get out. Just get out and vote.
Get out and vote.
Mm-hmm. That's the only thing we can say is get out and vote. Anything else requires paperwork.
We do this every week just to remind all of our followers and our listeners that you need to get out and vote. You got to make sure that you get out and vote because that's where it matters. So for those of you who are in Georgia, we remind you, 52 days. We started, I think it was like 300 something until you beat Stacey Abrams, because this is just our weekly reminder that the most important time for you to do is either early vote or on November 8th, get out and vote in the state of Georgia.
Absolutely. Nothing is more important at this point in time.
Absolutely.
It can't be understated. And that kind of jumps off into our first segment as well. And that's Kamalalalalala says that exactly. That was when Senator Perdue got up there and said that, I almost fell on the ground laughing. What was it, in Rome or was it in
I can't remember. They all run together now. Who've literally been on the run for like the last 2 weeks between various events. So,
may have been Macon. It was either Macon or Rome, one of the two.
It might have been Macon.
I think it was Macon, because when he got up on the stage and he said that, I just about died.
But it makes sense because all she does is la 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 all the way through. And so to the point and leading into this, right? And while we're saying that now is the time, if you're going to stand up for the freedom of our country, now is the time, because the Democrats have already announced where their focus is.
Yes.
And Kamala has said that their focus is killing the filibuster if they win the votes to be the majority in the Senate.
Well, if they pick up 2 additional seats.
Yeah.
They have to pick up 2 additional seats.
And that's what I mean, right? So what I mean by that is, for everyone who's been following, of course, if you're listening to us, you clearly follow politics, right? But we've had the 50-50 with the vice president as the split. And right now we have a major decision and a major factor inside of our country, because we have an opportunity to pick up. We really need to pick up 3, but we have an opportunity to pick up 5 potential seats inside of the Senate that can really affect how things go from here. And Kamala has come out and said that if the Democrats pick up the majority of those, they're going to destroy the filibuster, which is really holding back the majority of their agenda. Yes.
So of the seats that essentially that the Cook political report has announced are declared as kind of toss-up seats. One of them is a Republican seat, and that's the Wisconsin seat with Ron Johnson. And then you have 4 Democrat seats. Well, 3 Democrat seats and 1 open seat. And that the 3 Democrats are in Arizona with Senator Kelly. And then you have here in Georgia with Senator Warnock. And then you have another one in Nevada with it's Senator Cortez Masto. And then, of course, you have the Pennsylvania open seat.
Yeah.
So the Democrats could potentially lose 3 of the seats that they currently hold, as long as we maintain the seats that we still hold. Then we're at least the filibuster has an opportunity not to be busted and taken to task. That being said, we have a unique opportunity here in Georgia, just simply because of the fact that we do have an open Senate seat. Well, not an open Senate. We have a contested Senate seat that's running, and we have the ability to get out and vote for the candidate of our choosing.
One thing that I found interesting that someone said to me this past week was, when you look at the current senator in the state of Georgia and his opponent on the Republican ticket, you can really see, what it really boils down to is one has a voting record now and one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say whatever you can about a non-politician running for office, and you can bring up anything in their past or anything of that nature. But the reality is one of them has actually decided what they are. So they can say and do and campaign whatever they want to, but they've already shown that 96% of the time that they have voted alongside the president and his administration. That is the most impactful part that I think we as conservatives really need to look at.
Only 96%. I'm curious what that other 4 is.
I
have to look into that.
So I didn't really dabble down the numbers. I just remember verbatim what someone told me, and it was very relevant in my mind, right? So I'm
just curious.
I'm curious of how you get to 4%, like 4% out of 96 when there's a and here's the other thing too, right? That we don't necessarily think about, like what if he wasn't present for the vote, or if he just decided not to vote,
or if that even factors into it,
right? That's something that we can dabble into. But what the statistic that someone gave to me, who I trust their figures, said that 96% of the time, this individual, who's our current senator in the state of Georgia, who's up for re-election, voted with along party lines with the Democrats in the administration. So take out everything else, take out all the other noise, regardless of whatever you think of the other candidate, right? You know that this person does not stand up for your values.
No, especially not us here in Northwest Georgia. For one, we believe in our right to bear arms. We believe in our right to free speech.
Yep.
We believe in the right to life.
Yep.
Those are 3 very distinct, very hard line, very red line in the sand issues that this the current serving member has continually expressed issues and expressed support against how we fall in that. I mean, he's essentially his entire voting block and his entire voting status, or everyone that would vote for him or support anything that he would run for, is in Metro Atlanta.
Yep. And it's only locked inside of Metro Atlanta,
Yes.
Which is very interesting. I know for the rare times where Justin and I had a couple hours off, we got to go down to Atlanta and watch ball game, and it was interesting to see the level of propaganda that is displayed inside of the inner city versus what we in Northwest Georgia and our friends down in South Georgia see every day.
Yes, a local elected official, or he claimed to be a local elected official, we don't really know if he was or not, said that the current U.S. Senate member didn't instill a lot of divisiveness as much as the candidate that's running against him. That I just didn't see, because our current senatorial member preaches abortion from the pulpits.
Yeah, I was very, and y'all know, anyone who knows me knows that the very few times that I'm off the clock, I am off the clock. So I don't want to acknowledge it. I don't want to talk about it. And it only takes an instant for everything to get riled up, and then I'm pissed off and I'm ready to fight. So anyway, in the middle of this individual kind of brought this up, and Justin was going at it for a second, and I'm like trying to ignore it and try not to get involved, but it was just very interesting to see that
Jamie was sitting between us.
Yeah, I was sitting in between, right? And I'm just trying to watch the ball. So anyway, anybody who knows me with sports knows how well this was going anyway. So here's someone who, was saying that they just want us to get back to unity, which all 3 of us agreed upon. But they thought that someone who is so off base from the majority of Georgia was the person who might be able to bring it to. And I was not about to have that conversation, especially at the start of the ball game. But that just tells you the level of what's going on inside the metro area and how different they are from the rest of Georgia.
I still have scabs from where I was biting my tongue.
Y'all. I'm just trying to watch football. And I couldn't tell you, like, Justin had a hat representing a candidate and I had a shirt representing that same candidate. And because I had a vest on representing the team, he couldn't see my shirt. So he immediately, and I don't know, I'm just gonna be honest, the guy was black and he was probably talking just because he was white and asking the question, just being honest. So then I'm sitting here and I'm trying not to hop in and just pay attention. But long story short, it's going to be very interesting to see, and it's going to be very important for conservatives not to hold out come November.
Yes, there were a lot of people that had their feelings hurt in regard to the candidate that they had supported during the primary for this year. That cannot be a reason why you do not turn out and cast your ballot. If you do not turn out and if you don't come out and vote, if you decide that it's rigged, it's fraudulent, anything along that line, if that's your decision and you decide that you're not going to vote because of that, anything that comes after this is your fault because you decided not to participate in it. And quite frankly, if you do decide not to participate in it, you can't say, and not just that, you don't have the right to say anything for the next 4 years if Stacey Abrams is our governor.
And well, so you know what, that makes
not the first word.
And that makes a very valid point, right? Because I say this all the time. Primaries, in my opinion, are like sibling rivalries.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like family squabbles.
But you never forget that you're a family.
Mhm.
It's just like, you know, most of us, especially on the conservative side, we're always taught, you know, you don't take the family problems outside the house.
Yes.
So when you fight with your sibling, whoever wins, you stand beside them if someone else comes in or anything else happens outside of the family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that's very valuable, right? We can go back at it in 2 to 4 years, however y'all want to. That's just the bottom line. You didn't feel that your candidate won. Okay, well, vote for the Republican right now.
Exactly.
Vote for the Republican, and then and when we get to the next primary, put somebody else up. We'll have another sibling rivalry, and then we'll get ready for the next in.
There are several people on the ballot that it's going to turn my stomach to cast my vote for, or to cast my ballot for, but I'm going to do it regardless, just simply because I know what's going to happen if I don't, and I will not be responsible for it.
I'm excited about everybody on the ballot, but that's my thing. So,
Jamie has no shame.
But you know what? Like that's the truth of it. And
yes,
you know, we cannot allow, because the filibuster is just the start of it.
Yes, it is.
Luckily enough, some of the things that, and we made sure we did our research on this. Well, Justin made sure he did the research for both of us on this, but that the things that we were really worried about the John Lewis bill and things like that, they died with the last Congress.
Yes.
So in the next Congress, you know, they would have to bring them back through. But if we do not gain the majority in the House and the Senate, especially now, I'll get to that in just a second. Especially now, we will lose the long-term battle.
Yes. So with the extra, if we don't at least keep the 50-seat majority or 50-seat line in the Senate, and we don't get the massive wave that we're seeing in the House, or that we're hoping is going to come in the House, then we're looking at potential things that are like it may not be Build Back Better to that level, but we may see stuff sneaking through like incrementally with Republican line bills that Democrats have snuck in amendments and little things in the cracks through. And you'll have Republicans who don't typically read the bills come out and say, oh, that's a great title and it's everything that I support it, so I'm going to vote yes for it. Well, but it had these little provisions in it that
absolutely
essentially strip the states away with their voting rights.
And well, the most important for me is majority of your governorships, and especially the presidency, the most dangerous years are year 3 and 5 through 8, right? Mm-hmm. Because if they're a one-term president, those last 2 years are when they try to sneak everything in. If they do get elected a second time, their entire last term is when you see the most radical version of them, is because they can't be reelected.
Exactly.
And so that's what my biggest worry is because, you know, we all know in our hearts that Joe Biden is a one-term president, right? The fear, and what we have to make sure that everyone else understands, is that if we lose the House and the Senate because people do not get out and vote, mm-hmm. that they will start pushing that radical agenda early.
Oh yeah. And I honestly,
and we'd have
with
to
the midterms, the midterms are where this crucial battle is going to take place. Yep. If we don't have the massive red surge that we're that we should be having in these midterms, then we might as well just go ahead and write multiple things off.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, imagine this. We don't have the massive gains that we wanted in the House, and we only hold, say, a 10-seat majority. Then the Democrats come in and they pick up those extra 2 seats that they need. They nuke the filibuster. They sneak in something from the Senate side.
Build back better.
No,
clean energy.
Build back better would be that's too big.
Deal.
Well, no, not entirely, because I don't think that I believe the Republicans will caucus against that with the majority in the House.
I'm fearful of it. Yeah.
One of the things that I don't think that the Republicans will caucus completely together would be something like an assault weapons ban.
Yeah, that's true. We've seen how that shakes out already with some of the information. They'll just add to what they've already passed.
Yes, exactly. They will essentially strip all of our rights as far as being able to own what they deem as weapons of war. And
I'll go ahead and tell you, as a bureaucrat, bureaucrat school, right? That's what we're taught, is where we start off is incremental. Yes. You start out with the entirety of the bill, right? And then once you go through these public inputs and everything else, you dwindle it down into what you can get passed. And then
at that point in time,
and then you try to add to it, because it's easier to add to a law than it is to get it passed in its entirety the first time.
Absolutely.
So that's my biggest fear about, and we'll get into the next topic, these gun registries, these red flag laws, these assault weapon bans, all of it together is, where do we start? And we've already seen the basis of where they want to start and what they've gotten some Republicans to sign off on.
Yeah, it's truly horrifying what some Republicans have sold their souls to be able to say, "Hey, I am empathetic to what you're going through with this."
And look, and that's the thing for me. Though I'm a moderate, and I understand some things from some of those types of Republicans, that's one thing that I just can't get with is the assault weapons ban, or any form of like to me that goes 2A goes back to the core of our Constitution. Like if we do not protect the underlining understanding and ideology of making sure that we have the ability to arm ourselves against a tyrannical government, then at some point America will become a aristocracy, or will be Hunger Games, which is my biggest fear, or we'll be a monarch.
May the luck be ever in your favor. And with that, we always like to remind our viewers to make sure they're hitting the like and the share button on any of the content that they come across and in the platforms that we do share all this out on. And while you're there, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button as well. That way you can stay up to date on any of the productions we do produce and put out there. While you're there, also make sure you're going to our website at conservativestalk.com and become a sponsor today. Help us out with what you're able to. If you go to our website, the sponsor tab is in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner. Every little bit goes a long way. And while you're there, make sure you stop by our homepage and leave us your email address. We will have an email that's going to be coming out. As always, it's coming. It's coming. Hand on the Bible, it's coming. So, about the next topic. Now getting back onto our next topic. Democrats getting back to their roots with the election fraud.
This one upsets me more than anything else in the world.
I knew it would.
Because here's the problem, okay? Like, once again, the hypocrisy that comes out of the left is atrocious. Okay. So for the last 4 years, basically, right? Two definitely, but really, when you really get back to it, it goes back to 2018 and Stacey Abrams and all this other kind of stuff. And what has started to happen is when a Democrat says that an election has its issues or is stolen or is fraudulent or anything like that, no one bats an eye. No one asks any questions. Everyone just says, you know what, they're probably right. But if a Republican says it, it's fraudulent and people's doors get kicked in, and it's a whole nother matter.
And they start issuing subpoenas from the FBI for private business owners, for are from states because are looking for contents of their cell phones and trying to essentially, trying to get to where they're able to get into a private cell phone, download all the information they have on there, and peer through their private conversations.
They are putting people in jail, taking people's livelihoods, and destroying lives for the same things that they are claiming.
Yes, absolutely. And that they have done more in the past than any other political institution.
Than anybody else. Than anyone else.
Yes, exactly.
So for those of you who don't know kind of what we're talking about, recently there was it was a special election that happened down in Texas. And the Texas election was it was an election right on the border. It was where Representative Flores won this seat. Well, in a meeting before this, after the election, after she had already won that seat, and the candidate that's running against her, and I'm not going to use the candidate's name because I don't want to give them any promotion on it or any props or anything like that. That candidate who is running against her for this midterm election as well came out and said that this election was stolen, that it was fraudulent because of the amount of money from outside organizations that was spent on that election. What does that sound like? Who does that? I remember one of the first campaigns I worked on was District 2 down in Florida. And in District 2 down in Florida, if anybody knows, that runs from Panama City to Tallahassee.
At that time, yes.
At that time. It's not that anymore, 10 years. Anyway, the candidate, the current elected official at the time who we were down there helping was, needed as much help as he could. The candidate was a Democrat, and, the Speaker of the House had come out and said, we're going to put $15 million into the Democratic opponent's campaign to help them out from all across the country, from California primarily, New York, and everywhere else. And the local guy who was literally running a campaign on fishing rights, because we're talking about a majority area where their biggest issue is making sure that they have the best fishing. I don't even know how to describe that. That's not
tourism
that's
is a big
tourism
deal,
is a big thing, but
this
fishing
tourism industry.
Yeah, and fishing is a primary source of income for a lot of people who live on the panhandle. And so that's what he was advocating for. And they come in and rush $15 million, which at the time was unheard of. An unheard of amount of money. And now we've tripled that almost in some elections. Anyway, my whole point in this is to fast forward less than 6 to 8 years, and for them to come out and say that they feel that something was taken from them, that election was stolen from them because of the same tactic that they have been using across the country.
Yes.
It's hypocrisy at its finest.
Yes. And it's even more juicy to mention that we had Shifty there for that speaking opportunity as well. So where you have this candidate who's running for this office against the sitting member, and then you had Adam Schiff there in the audience as well. As we well know, Adam Schiff is one of the lead folks and the propaganda against all of this deal.
Yep. The main lead.
Exactly. So for him to be there in the audience and for him to take place or him to take part in that whole mantra deal just really speaks volumes of what Democrats actually are.
And the depths that they're willing to go. There's no principle.
No, none at all.
That's the bottom line for me. To me, it's the principle. Okay. We can disagree on what a moral stance is, for those of us who are Christian faith, that we're guided by the good book. Those who aren't necessarily of that faith, but may have a religious being, are guided by other areas. Okay. But or even if not, there's a list of principles that any decent person should follow. We are now seeing that these lead Democrats don't even have that.
Well, they're godless heathen.
They heathen is the best word, because even someone who, I just don't even think this way, but even someone who isn't principled, right? Because I can't even get it out of my mouth. Even someone who isn't principled or doesn't have a set of values that they will stand behind, like integrity or goodness, or decent, being a just decent commonality amongst humans, whatever. Anyway, I'm just so flustered because I'm just so pissed off at it. But they just don't have the same understanding of what it means to be a good citizen that we do.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100% on that one. They have become the party of murdering innocents in the womb. They have become the party of removing protections from communities by defunding the police. They have, well, not just that, but also by trying to strip away our rights, our fundamental rights as individuals to be able to protect ourselves, not only against anyone that would be trying to come in to harm us, but also any organization or entity that might try to become more tyrannical in a sense. They have become the party of the handouts. They have become the party of trying well, I'm gonna jump back to that last one, the handouts. I mean that, so we've got all of the and I know might touch on a nerve here with the student loan forgiveness. You've got all of the stay at home during COVID, getting paid with the unemployment insurance. You've got all of these issues that these government or these organizations are really just throwing money at these issues, and not even with the mindset of the ramifications in the future of what is going to hurt us in the long run.
So again, I just want to make this point. Again, I want to make this point, okay? And here's why I separate the two. The federal government canceling its own debt is one thing, okay? Here's where the problem is. The federal government adding expenditures off of one-time services or one-time grants, funds, acts, policies, anything else, only increases taxes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because when you start looking at what happened with COVID, okay, and some of the funds that were shifted out during that time period, with all the different policies, you had a lot of Democratic areas and ran municipalities that what they did was they used this to create more government programming. The problem is that when that money runs out, those programs stay there and the people that you hired don't get fired. So you now have to increase taxes or increase some form of government spending in order to take care of them. That is, again, fundamentally different than canceling out what was already on the books.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to start creating those things like that, and we're going to start numbering the rabbit holes that come up.
Yeah, it's going to be one by one, and we need to remember the bureaucrat, man.
Yeah, exactly. But so, getting back on topic,
ran over.
The Democrats being essentially the party of destroying America in a sense of taking where we were. They've removed us from being energy independent. They have put us back on reliance from other organizations. They have put us to where we're not able to produce enough energy to where we're even able to be stable anymore. So no, they have taken us and reduced us to the point to where we are no longer that average producing and good citizen like you were talking about. So it's interesting to note that in all honesty, I don't know if it was their goal or their intention for it to be done like this, or if they thought that this may just be a great idea and that this would just work out like it's some kind of magical fairyland. But
I think so, because look at who they serve, right?
Serve themselves.
Well, here's what I mean by that, right?
In the elite cabal.
If your intention was to protect the American citizen and to truly help the American citizen rise up, give them a hand up, not a hand out, then you would not believe in this method. If your intention is to keep people oppressed, because that's what it is, right? Keep them at a certain level, but allow for you to make certain gains and returns that keep you above other people, then of course you would want these policies.
So what you're maybe referring to is, say, a certain president's son benefiting off of the sales of our petroleum reserves, and making it look like the oil prices are dropping, but at the same time depleting our strategic area where we need this actual oil in case of an actual emergency, not a politically created one.
So before I get too devil, because I have to be controlled on this show sometimes, but the reality is this is for the first time in U.S. history, we're selling oil to China, and we're not selling.
No, exactly.
We're not selling oil that is now being produced.
Nope.
So what has happened is this Biden administration, in an effort to drop the price of oil, he is selling it to his son and his son's Chinese company that he's a board of. So, but they're not selling the produced oil. They're selling the reserves. So if we were ever to get into a crisis, we wouldn't have the reserves that we would need to function the country for a length of time until we could rebuild.
An actual crisis that was not politically made because of policies and agendas that were passed by the current administration. We are technically in a crisis because we did not have enough oil to be able to produce the necessary fuel to be able to send out and to really get across our country to be able to keep our infrastructures and to be able to have our supply chain up and running the way it should be, in the way it needs to be. But they're selling it and sending it out there, and we're not able to have that in reserve. So we're not, if we actually do come across a crisis to where this is not something that we're able to produce and put out there, then we're not going to have it in stock, and it's really going to bite us in the tail.
And the best way to kind of explain this as simple as I can: if you take away the gas taxes, if you take away all the things that we have done on a local level and a state level to make sure that our oil prices stay one of the lowest in the country, we would still be at $5 a gallon. And if a crisis happened, we would see record highs of probably $10 a gallon in somewhere that is the lowest in the country. And it would probably be close to $20 a gallon in places like California, and we still would not be able to have enough oil in reserve to function, all because Joe Biden sold our reserves to his son and to China.
So I'm actually starting to see some reports that are saying that the oil prices they've reached the bottom of where they're going.
They can't go anywhere.
They're going to start rebounding back up.
Because we cut all the taxes.
Absolutely.
We've sold all that we can, because there's only a certain amount of reserves that we can sell before we truly reach a critical mass, right?
Yes.
So until they actually come to grips with the fact that we need to be more energy independent, we're going to continue to hit another issue.
But Jamie, places like Texas that are one of the most independent states out there, most of their grid is ran on renewable energy, like wind and solar.
Okay.
We saw what happened to that last year during the winter when the windmills froze over and half of the entire state went black. And then you have states like California who are essentially saying that there are not going to be any any combustion engine vehicles to be sold in the state come 2030 or so.
2035.
Yeah. Well, no, 2030, actually, I think is what it was. None are going to be allowed in the state, but yet they are coming out and saying, hey, please don't charge your vehicles over the weekend because our power grid can't handle it.
And to back up, 2030 was when they were going to stop allowing them to be imported in or manufactured in to be sold. 2035 was when they wanted to phase out all the ones and make sure that everyone had an electric car. But they are having rolling blackouts because they've already reached critical mass on people using power and people charging their vehicles.
I think only 5% of the state actually has EVs right now too.
Think about that. Think about that.
And the rolling blackouts or the brownouts, as they call them, they're not anything new for California either. No. Because they've been having these issues for quite a while.
And it's very interesting to see how go back to the Texas winter storm and how the left was so against privatizing power companies and had such an issue with the fact that we were trying to protect the grid and getting off of, making sure that we had the capacity and not forcing people to take on wind and other you know, green energy type, facilities. And so now we've reached a point to where now they've changed the hypocrisy, right? They changed that mantra again, and we're like, oh no, like all of it needs to be on there so we can produce more of electric cars, but you can only charge them certain days, and it'll just be like our burn ban periods, pretty much.
Burn ban periods, for those who are not aware, can last up to months.
Can you imagine? We're going to reach, if the Democrats were in control, we're going to reach a point in this country to where there will be not only burn ban periods, but there will be light out periods. So
a national curfew
on when you had to turn all your lights out and you couldn't start a fire because you were in the burn ban too. That's what we're getting close to.
I hope not in my lifetime, because I'll be the guy who's standing out there, who's flips on every light in the house and stands there defiantly. It's like, all right, come turn them off.
I'll go out swinging. That's always been my end game.
It's always the exit strategy.
Always the exit strategy.
But as always, we like to remind all of our viewers to make sure they're hitting the like button and the share button on any of the productions that they see on any of the platforms that we do upload any of our content to. And while you're there, also make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. That way you can stay up to date on any of the content that we produce and put out on any of these platforms. Also, make sure you go to our website, conservativestalk.org, and hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and help us out with what you're able to, because every little bit goes a long way into really revamping these productions and making them better and better and better throughout the entire time of what we're doing. So now let's get into the topic that, quite frankly, terrifies me on multiple levels, and it's not just because of the Second Amendment implications, because of the overreaching implications of we have some of the major or we have some of the largest financial institutions now going so wholeheartedly into the woke agenda that I don't know if they're going to be able to tailspin out of it.
I'm going to go somewhere that I usually don't. Here's what I mean by that.
What do you think? I need a graphic.
Yeah. So here's kind of my problem, right? For the first time, we saw non-governmental organizations, NGOs, get involved into militarized governmental conflicts when the U.S. and the Western world had reached out to McDonald's and all the other, Fortune 500 companies in Russia, right? That opened up a line of communication when they told them to pull out. Visa, MasterCard still kept that open line of communication. And now look what has happened. They have now, basically what has happened is you now have the administration, and this is just my speculation, right? Because I can't prove this, but you have this Democratic policy and administration reach out to the card holders. They've now gone to the financial standard people who organize this across the globe. And they said, you know what, pretty much we're going to create a code for anybody who buys firearm and ammunition. And they have now created a privatized registry because we wouldn't allow them to create a gun registry through Congress inside the United States.
Yes. So what Jamie's speaking about is Visa, MasterCard, American Express, all of the world's largest financial transaction institutions have gotten together and they reached out to an organization called, the International Standards Organization, which essentially sets the financial regulations. They're not really laws or regulations, that they're more just the standards, the practices, the best standards and practices to make everything run smoothly and organized and everything along that line. Well, they reached out to them, and in agreement with a little over 100 other countries, they all came up with a new separate code for whenever you purchase a firearm accessory, or any sort of ammunition, and use one of these financial institutions for the transaction for that, you will essentially be going on a list. That list is supposed to be, that list can be held by these institutions. However, because of the terms and agreements that you hit yes on, you have given these organizations the right to be able to sell or give away this list.
Yep.
so these guys have effectively come in, created what just about every Republican that has been in office forever has stood so heartily against, and that is a gun registry where the federal government knows where every firearm that's purchased is going and where it's not.
So when you add in some things that we talked about on the previous show, now every piece of the gun is going to be on one registry. And now, even if you were to skirt around that, if you are not going directly to either a gun manufacturer or a arms dealer and paying cash, then you are going to be on another registry because you pay with the debit card because your debit card company is going to sell you out.
So what had happened before that, they had created codes that whenever you purchase anything, say you buy groceries, you have one code for it. If you buy clothing, there's another code for it. If you're buying sporting goods and equipment, there's another code for it. Well, they took that sporting goods and equipment and they wrote an entirely separate code that lumped all of these firearm-based issues under that one code. So whenever you go and purchase these, you are going on this list. And that in of a sense is something that horrifies me.
And this is why I take out a little bit of cash every paycheck. Because at some point,
you hoarding guns. Is that what it is?
Well, I'm not saying what I'm hoarding, but what I'm saying is that we're going to reach a critical mass point. Now, though I believe in the technology that backs cryptocurrencies, once we go from decentralized to centralized cryptocurrencies, we're in the same problem that we're already facing. And the banking system is already a step ahead of us, right? And
that's especially when we go to a cashless society. And I want to throw that in there because I know where you're heading on that.
Yeah, because at some point, right, we've already started to see, and I hate to say it, like, in Atlanta, we have this thing called, ITP inside the perimeter, and most things that most things that you would use cash for, you shouldn't be using cash for anyway, because they don't understand, our belief system, right? They just go back to the democratic heart of Georgia, right? But we're starting to see this cashless society movement that's been kind of bubbling up over the last 8 years.
I would say significantly in the past year and a half, especially with COVID.
And it's increased because of COVID and small tie-in. Okay. A couple years ago, I went to a luncheon for the Atlanta Fed. And this was before cryptocurrency got its big boost. And I asked members of the Atlanta Fed who were there hosting the luncheon, when do you think that cryptocurrencies or digital payments will make a big leap? And so their thing is that until a asset class does $100 billion in transactions, Federal Reserves don't necessarily pay attention to it. This was before you start to see the $1 trillion market cap inside of cryptocurrencies. Well, so what started to happen is that once this cashless society movement started going, once cryptocurrency started going, and then you add in the whole era of COVID that we went through really 2020 until, end of last year, people started using more forms of digital payment. And that's fine as long as it's decentralized. And the difference is this: when you're using decentralized payment, it's basically going through someone else's computer. When it's centralized, that means it's going through your bank's computer. So even digital payments will now be checked through your bank's system, which goes back. And even if you were to buy a gun on eBay, then it'll put that code with it now, whereas beforehand it wouldn't. Now, that is a problem, not because of the fact of, we should be able to monitor certain things just for homeland security efforts, but because of the fact that we are now, that's another level of infringement on our privacy.
Yeah. So to summarize all that up. So when we go to
that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah. When you go to a cashless society, so what it does is it creates a registry or it creates a list of every transaction. And because of the serialized nature of firearms and things along that, it becomes almost impossible for it not to be traced from every single step. So it will be able to be followed at every point throughout any transaction whatsoever.
And mark my words, and this is going to be my last thought on this part. The start of it is when they do away with the penny. And here's why. When we change the penny from copper to zinc, because now if you've noticed, and anyone will notice, right, when you used to be able to take a copper penny and leave it in your cup holder, right, nothing would happen to it. It may turn a little green. But now if you leave it in there, it will literally start to dissolve. And that's because it's no longer made of copper, it's made of zinc. They did that because they want to start to phase out the penny itself. When they completely phase out the penny and start to phase out change in its totality, the next thing is cash, and we'll be fully in a cashless society.
So what he's saying is save your pennies.
You're ready for it. That's why wheat pennies are worth so much. That's a whole nother ballgame.
So we always like to remind everyone that's viewing any of our content to make sure that you're hitting the like button and the share button. That way you can help us get higher into the news feed on any of our social media platforms that we do share our content on. Make sure you're also hitting the subscribe button. That way you can keep up to date with any of the productions that we do put out there on any of the platforms. And also make sure you're going to our website, conservativestalk.org, and helping us out with whatever you're able to. Every little bit goes a long way, but you can hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and go through that process there. And it really helps us to be able to take our production and to the next level, and to be able to spread our message and get it as far and wide as absolutely possible. So to a point that Jamie and I kind of have some conflicting issues on, or at least a stance on, and that is to strike or not to strike. And as always, that is the question.
That is the question.
So what we're referring to here is at this moment right now, we are less than 23 or less than 26 hours away from essentially. So we would be seeing the first strike that is going to take place within the freight railway system in the last 30 years. And this comes on the heels of one of the greatest supply chain disruptions in American history.
And something that is also not very well known to the majority of the public. And here's kind of the problem.
It's kind of getting buried.
It's kind of getting buried
really
because I think a lot of people don't know the impact that's getting ready to happen to us, which is why
the news media doesn't want this getting out, especially this close to the midterms.
Correct. And especially with the impact that it's not only going to have the Biden administration, but the country. And this kind of also explains, to kind of sum it up and make a correlation, some of the similar issues that we saw with trucking in Canada, was it last year or something around that time frame?
This year.
It was early this year. Time moves so fast in my world. But we're getting ready to have a major rail and transportation and supply chain issue when it comes to getting goods and supplies across the country.
Yes. And so what that's stemming from is the conditions that are a result of all of the Democrat-led COVID lockdowns and shutdowns and everything across the country, where we had all of these Democrat cities and these Democrat states shutting their states down and saying, hey, you can't go to work and do all these things. Well, by placing all of this on this very small part of what is the massive infrastructure and our massive supply chain. So keep in mind with this right here, there are only about 100,000 employees that are unionized employees that work within the freight or work within the rail system. Only 100,000 of over the millions of miles of track that have been laid out. And, you think, oh, well, that's not that much, that's like one for every 100 miles or so. Well, these unionized workers, these 100,000 unionized workers represent much more than just your conductor and your navigator, because for every train, there are actually only two people that operate it, and that's the conductor and the engineer and the navigator. Everyone else works in maintenance. They're working within making sure the facilities are up to code. They're making sure that everything is, all the tracks are well laid and maintained. So it's not just the folks that are driving or that are controlling the trains and moving the freight, it's everyone else. Well, the massive majority are half of the folks who are unionized that work within these organizations are the engineers and the navigators. So you're looking at about 50,000 people. Well, the union organizations that are over this 50,000 person block has gone to the railroad organizations, the companies that own and move freight everywhere, and told them, look, you're really overworking our guys. They're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And sometimes when they're not working 7 days a week, they're only working 6 days a week. You have them on call 24/7. So there is no rest. There's no time. There's no ability for them to be able to have a family life. They're not able to see their kids, their wives, their families, anything along that line. Anything outside of work, they're no longer able to do. So a lot of these guys are getting fed up and they're leaving that industry. So by leaving that industry, it's creating a massive shortfall and creating a lot more short-staffed scenarios to where it's creating even a higher demand on the folks that are staying. Now, granted, they have come out with some concessions. I believe it was about a 14% immediate raise, and they would get a $1,000 a month annual or a $1,000 a month cash bonus added to their paychecks. And over the next 5 years, it would go from a 14% raise up to a 24% raise. That's great, no, but still, you're taking away the time and stripping these people from being able to see their families and have an actual family life.
Yeah.
And here comes the bureaucrat.
Here's my thing, right? And for those of you who listen, like, take this from someone who don't have a family. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have a family. So when you're telling me that I already make, like, on average $125,000 a year, but I feel I need to be paid $150, but we got homeless people and everything else, like, I'm not gonna gripe as much. Like, don't get me wrong, I get it, I understand. It's hard. We work multiple jobs that I wish we could consolidate into one, but we're working seven days a week, maybe get a couple hours off here and there to take a nap every once in a while. But I get it. I get it. If I always try to put myself in everyone's shoes. Okay. If I had a wife and kids, I would want to see them. I would want to spend time with them. I want to watch them grow up. And there's no point in making so much money that you can't enjoy it. I understand that. To derail the entire country, though, because I'm having a hard time for a little while, is what I got a problem with. That's just my personal opinion.
And I can see that.
Because at some point, there's certain jobs, there's certain professions that you go into knowing that, or that you eventually have to realize that you're bigger. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than how you feel. It's bigger than what you're going on. Same thing is if you work in politics, if you work in government. Like, do you think I like getting up in my day job and going out and putting out barricades at 4 o'clock in the morning or doing things like that for other issues? Heck
Knowing
no.
you,
heck no. You know what I mean? Like, or in the middle of the night when I have to get up and, go watch different various things go on inside of a project. No, that's not what I want to do. But I realize that what I do, though it's not to the scale as these individuals who are making sure that our railroads are okay, because that's a massive job, which is why I do sympathize, right? But like, if I mess up, it doesn't affect Jamie. It affects the 50 to 100,000 people who come through my area every day, and I have to keep that in mind.
So, taking that logic and saying, okay, so now you don't have to work. So you're now only going from your 5-day work week. You're now working 7-day work weeks, 12 hours a day. In that same mindset, how quickly would you stay in that job? How quickly would you get burnout in it? How quickly would you leave it? And how quickly would you come to the point to where you were so just exhausted to where it was no longer safe for you to operate in those conditions?
I don't know, because I think about that every day. You know, there go time periods in my job where I will literally come home and cry on my way home. But one thing, and this is where I'm different, right? And again, I don't know. I say this as a single male who comes home to no wife and kids, okay, who also realizes his impact is bigger than just himself. If I had a wife and kid at home, then I would realize that that's where my impact is valued. So I feel that my view would change.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I just, you know, cry and suck it up, buttercup, when that clock rings and it's time for me to get up and go to work.
Well, you know, I guess if they only hired young single guys, then we wouldn't have nearly have this amount of problem with it. But it's so the reason why this is such a big deal and such a big issue is because they are speculating that for every 1 day that this strike is going on, it's going to have a nearly $2 billion negative impact on our economic success as a country. So,
which is why I'm sitting here and I'm like, I know you're tired, and I sympathize with that. And I do feel that there's a certain level of compensation that needs to be set aside for it. But while your union reps are trying to work for that, striking and shutting down the entire economy is not okay.
So to your point there, so 2 unions have agreed to the terms that the government has essentially laid out. One organization has refuted and turned down these terms, but they agreed to continue to work until the strike period has come about from the other 2 unions.
So I guess that's one thing that we didn't explain either is how we got here. That is true.
So one of the things that is so interesting about this is that when it comes to mass transit and infrastructure, the federal government, especially when it has to do with interstate commerce, has exclusive purview to be able to intercede when it comes to unionized organizations, labor strikes, and things along that nature. So back in July, this was becoming a major issue. The freight and rail industry had already began reaching a critical point to where they were wanting to already go on strike. Well, President Biden came in with a stroke of a pen, said, no, get back to work.
Because
but that only lasted for 60 days.
Correct. Which is also insane. Now we'll give that. That's anything, right? I'm not a big union fan anyway.
Yeah, and the fact that I'm pro-union right here with this right here is really starting to eat at my.
I know that's really getting you, right? Because that we kind of switched roles for this topic, but I'm not a big union guy. But literally the fact that because you're in a certain industry and literally at the stroke of a pen, the president of the United States can say, I don't care what you think.
Privatized industry too.
Privatized industry. Well, yeah, that goes back to, the 1800s are a very interesting time for me because, what was private and what was public, it's a real blurry line.
That's very true.
Especially when it comes to the railroad.
Yes. But yeah, it's so at this point in time at 12:01 on Friday morning, if an agreement has not been reached, then half of our entire rail industry, and by the time that this show is released, we could potentially be in the middle of a rail strike.
Yeah.
So
and imagine the issue in Canada, the baby formula issue, and the gas crisis all kind of rolled into one.
Everything,
everything that we've gone through in the last 2 years, all rolled into one, stopping at one time.
Imagine an entire third of all freight and products throughout the entire country ceasing to be transported. Anyway,
Stopping.
an entire third of it.
Within a week, every Walmart, Aldi's, Kroger will be out of supplies.
2 days.
Like, you know what I mean? Well, once the
That's
masses,
panic buying right there.
Yeah, once the masses find out about it, you know what I mean? But like, even if they slowball it, like the Biden administration is planning on doing, even if they slowball it, like a week in time, you're not restocking. People are just going to buy up everything that's there. It's not going to be restocked. And then what do you do?
Yes.
Hope you can hunt.
Yeah. So if they're not able to reach terms by Friday morning, and the only thing that would be able to stop these union organizations from going on strike would be congressional action. Democrats say that they are unlikely to take it. There have been a couple of Republicans in the Senate that have already said that they're working on pieces of legislation, drawing it up to essentially force these people to work and to do this. Again, I'm getting heartburn on advocating against this because I don't believe, because I completely understand what these guys are going through and what they're standing up and fighting for, because they're not standing up and fighting for additional money. They're trying to make the companies that employ them hire more people so they are not so short-staffed. Well,
and I'll play devil's advocate for a second, and they just want a good quality of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, which is all any of us ask for in our job. All anybody ever asks, really, truthfully, as an American citizen, all we ask for is good pay for 5 days and 2 days off. That's it. That's all we ask for. The ability for
nights and weekends
for an ability to be able to own a home with a picket fence, have a couple kids, come home to our spouse, and you know what I mean, be able to have all of our needs and wants met. And when that is off kiltered because we can have our needs and wants met by the level of pay that we have, but the fact that you can't enjoy that with your family, you miss out a lot. I get that.
And it's not like this is something that has just started taking place. This is something that has been going on for a year and a half, 2 years now. It's been slowly building to a boiling point, and it's been building up more and more since before COVID had even happened, because this is an industry that not a lot of folks go into. Not a lot of people know about going into.
And and you know, it's crazy. I guess it's not that I see it differently. But my granddad was born in the 30s, and at 18 he started working for the railroad, and that's where he retired from. And he had a wife and 3 girls, and you know what I mean, that's one of the values that he instilled in us is, you know, I'll just go ahead and say the function of a man in life is to go home and provide for his family. You know, you go to work, you don't gripe about it, you deal with it, you provide for your family. And, you know, there's a certain level that I get that, but that's still kind of an old timey mindset, because we're talking about an era where like women really didn't work. They didn't, you know, they weren't really allowed to work. They were housewives, things of that nature. But now we've reached an era to where, you know, it for most households, it's 50-50, and you want to be able to enjoy that time with your spouse because that's your partner that you've chosen to spend your life with and watch your kids grow up. So when you can't enjoy that bare necessity that we've come to love in America, you know, that can be frustrating in itself.
And that's what they're fighting for. But as always, we always like to remind all of our viewers to make sure that they are liking and sharing all the content that we produce and putting out on all the platforms. And make sure you're subscribing to any of our platforms that you see any of our content on. And make sure you're also going to our website, conservativestalk.org, and hitting the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner, and helping us out with what you're able to, because as always, every bit goes a very long way, and it really helps us be able to get our word and put it out as wide as possible.
Absolutely.
So let's get into what Buck was talking about, because this one's a little interesting. I will say it's
kind of wild, ain't it? I mean,
but is it wild though?
I mean, after everything else and what's going on so far, it's not that wild. But this is what happens when, and those of you who hadn't seen our kind of like sneak episode, we kind of win an episode without having Buck. And when we leave the guy alone by himself, he can do some digging. You know what I mean? And
he does.
He made a correlation that I don't think anybody kind of really recognized, because notice we had two acts that came out of this pandemic era.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one makes sense to what he's saying with, and the second one was what the first one was supposed to be. You know, so when what Buck is saying is there's supposed to be a correlation in between the CARES Act and things related to, you know, things that we necessarily may not know about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah. So what he's referring to is, so within the CARES Act and to really throwing a lot or the $1 trillion into the SBA fund, or the small business or the Small Business Administration Fund. The Inspector General that oversees the Small Business Administration started digging into where a lot of these funds were being shipped out to. Well, they came out with a staggering number, and that number being, and I want to get this right, 41,638 claims were determined to be fraudulent, and not just fraudulent, but fraudulent from foreign countries. And of these, essentially 42,000 fraudulent claims from foreign countries, $14 million of that went to what they suspect are criminal syndicates. And that could be anything from the Chinese mafia, Chinese gangs, to the Mexican cartels, to the Russian mafia, anything along those lines. And I'm really kind of leaning more towards the Russian mafia in a sense with that, because I mean,
I can't even speculate, because I mean, like, we're talking about.
Well, we know that we know that Joe really pushed this through quick, hard, and fast. And because it was pushed through so quick, hard, and fast, there were not a lot of safeguards that were put into place. There was no real vetting that happened with this. They said, I believe it was almost 41% of all of the SBA funds that were put out there, or all the claims that were put out there, have been determined to be fraudulent at some form or some level or another. So
I'm gonna explain.
I'm kind of thinking he may have pushed this out there and kept the restrictions loose just to kind of as a payoff to keep folks contained with his son's laptops.
So, you know, there's that gut feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And any old good Southerner knows that when you get that gut feeling, you're supposed to listen to it, you know, regardless, whatever it is, because he'll help you in the long run. I have a relationship with free money, free food, free anything. I'm probably going to take it. Okay. These PDP loans and everything else scared me, because everyone, if you know someone who took this loan, or if you were in the conversations with people who were debating on taking this loan, everyone was like, you heard the rumors, and the rumors were, take the money. No one's going to check it. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
They're just handing it out. Take the money. There was something wrong with that for me. So even though, like, you know, I'm talking, there were people talking about, like, literally people who were going to, like, going on websites, getting an LLC, and then filing for PDP loans, and then taking the money, and they're like, no one's going to ask any questions. Like, that's sketchy to me. I don't care. Like, this is the federal government of the United States of America. This is the IRS. The IRS will wait 20 years and come get you. Like, nope. I'm sorry. I'll just deal with my struggles, and, you know what I mean? Make sure everything's okay, and man the ship, be the captain, hold everything together. I'm not just going to take random money, because there's nothing that the federal government gives out that doesn't have strings attached.
Oh, no, there is nothing free. We end up paying for it at some level or another down the road. It's just, it's crazy to think that they allowed for nearly over $14 million of American money that was supposed to go to help businesses and organizations that had contingencies within the piece of legislation that was passed, that you had to be in the United States to get it, allowed for foreign countries to get these loans, and to not just foreign countries to get it, but for foreign criminal syndicates to be able to get it.
Well, here's what I linked it to in my previous statement, was the two acts are so polar opposites of each other. CARES money had no restraints.
Mm-hmm.
You could basically, like we were saying, apply for it, you probably got it. Whereas the next fund with the American Rescue Recovery Act, the money from it, like when it came out, there are people who still trying to figure out how they're going to spend it because there's so many regulations on it, or if they're even going to spend it in time because there's so many regulations on it. So they're polar opposites. So it doesn't surprise me that some of these foreign countries who had, U.S. LLCs took some of this money too and ended up being equated to some kind of crime syndicate somewhere else. So it doesn't surprise me when Buck was like, oh yeah, it's probably related to Hunter's laptop. Yeah, probably. Because hell, they literally gave away $1 billion. You had to be an idiot like me or be God fearing in order not to take the money.
They gave $40 billion to a country that is under assault, but yet no guidelines or restrictions on how that money is to be spent and no overseeing or monitoring any of it. In addition to that, all of the other aid that we've sent over there, there have been no checks on it. We have no idea where it's at, where it's being used. Some of it has been reported in other countries. So, I mean,
it's wild,
our government at this point in time will give away everything, including this kitchen sink, just to be able to say, hey, we did the right thing, we think. But,
this is wilder when we put Saddam in power.
Yeah. Or Noriega.
Yeah, or all of it.
Thinking back now, are we really that surprised?
I'm not. I'm really not. We created the power vacuums that we've been fighting.
You're right. We absolutely have. And it's we are reaping the benefits of what we sow.
All because we allowed poor administrations like this one. Usually, you know what else is crazy? A lot of times when you see stuff like this happen, it's really like a Democrat who did it. And but whatever.
Yeah.
But we're problem because we're nationalists. We believe in America first.
Absolutely. Christian nationalist, proud and strong.
Yep.
But as all things in this life, we have reached that inevitable conclusion, and we must end. And with that, we like to remind everyone that they are making sure that they are hitting the like button and the share button on any of the content that we produce on any of the platforms that we share it out on. And making sure you're also subscribing to any of these platforms as well, just where you're able to stay up to date with everything that we're putting out there, and you're able to really get a good understanding of who we are and be able to see Jamie's beautiful mug at any point in time. And while you're checking us out, make sure you're going to conservativestalk.org and hitting the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner or the lower right-hand corner and helping us out with what you're able to, because every little bit of our sponsorships go an incredibly long way. We're going to have to put a compilation out just showing exactly the progression of how we've came, because I'll put it this way. What you're seeing right now is night and day compared to where we started out at. We're still in the same room, but it's wild. It's night and day compared to what it looks like. And for you to be able to see it, it's wow. It's wild. Interesting to say the least. But while you're also on our website, make sure you go back to our homepage and leave us your email address. That way you can get and take part in our bi-weekly newsletter that is going to be coming out soon, that we always say, I promise I will put anything on it that it is coming out. And as always, our first newsletter that we'll send out is going to be kind of a sneak peek into one of the things that we're working on producing and putting together. And that's really going to have a lot of national implications. So you're going to want to be one of the first people to get in on this as well. And also, we want to say a very sincere thank you to our affiliates that are now carrying our productions and helping us in spreading our word and spreading our voice. And that is Veterans Voice with Veterans for America First, as well as netnewsnetwork.net. They are the national news organization that allows for Jamie and I to be able to go into the White House press briefing room if we wanted to. So that's actually something else.
Kind of scary.
We should do a fundraiser to send Jamie and Justin to DC. That's actually not a bad idea.
I'm not ready for that yet, but
send
we're getting
J&J to DC to meet KPJ.
Oh,
KJP or whatever
God,
it is.
the questions I would ask.
J&J versus
Can I please get some
KPJ.
answers on Hunter Biden's laptop? That'd probably be the first question I ask right from the middle of it, and they'd be like, out. Like, you know what I mean? It'd be worth it. Just like before it started, I go stand behind the podium. Like, you know what I mean? We'd take some pictures and I'd be like, I have a question about Hunter Biden's laptop and when the FBI is going to investigate Hillary Clinton. And then
just right in the middle of like every other reporter who's trying to ask a question, you just stand up and ask the same exact question until she addresses it.
Yeah, like I'm gonna wait for
He
CNN.
continues to do
I'm gonna wait for CNN to go, and then I'm gonna ask that question, and then they're gonna tell me to sit down, and then I'm gonna wait for MSNBC to go, and then I'm gonna stand up and ask the same question.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see.
That's an idea we'll have to look into.
Yeah,
in the
that'd be
future.
fun.
But let's jump into your favorite part.
Yes. 52 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
I am so excited to never be able to say that again because I hope to never hear this woman's name again outside of the romance novels that I love to read that I keep sitting on the kitchen sink next to the toilet.
I still don't understand. Like,
how does she write romance novels?
bleh.
Yeah, I did that earlier. I'm lucky I have a strong stomach.
Sorry. I can't. We need to cut.
So before we go, any last final words of wisdom?
Yes, and I made sure to write it down.
Oh gosh, you did, didn't you?
I wrote it down. Okay, so
beep.
It's better this time. Stop the chop.
It's the same thing.
Well, it's not chop it off. It's stop the chop.
Yeah, that's what you said the last time.
Masculinity.
Don't chop.
Don't chop it off.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not the same thing.
So,
see, that's a little bit more tasteful.
Yeah, but you're
for more of our astute listeners. If you can't tell, I don't like dressing like this. I like being a little redneck.
You see what I'm working with. But as
I
always,
be coot for the show over here. You know what I mean?
Thank y'all for listening, and we'll